Good afternoon, everyone. So today I want to talk about a DevRel program I put into place at MessageMedia where I work, and a framework and a structure we used there, and sort of how we went from sort of nothing to actually having something in place, and the way I went about that. So I'm not going to be talking about what DevRel is, because I think most of us are pretty comfortable with what it is. But what I will talk about is some of the ways that we went about measuring, which I find really difficult, and executing some of the things that we did in DevRel. I'm from Australia, if you haven't picked up by my accent, but in Australia it's quite a new concept. There's not a lot of companies that are doing DevRel, so it's sort of something that we're sort of experimenting with and starting to bring to companies and show people sort of how to do it there based on experiences from other countries. And there's a lot of different ways to do it as well. It's kind of like programming. There's many different ways that you can solve a problem, and I feel that with DevRel there's many different ways that you can sort of execute what you're trying to achieve. So I put forth to you that a successful DevRel program has a structured approach with all the activities that are aligned to what your goal is, and all of those activities are measurable in some way. So just to introduce myself, my name's Ben. I work at MessageMedia as an engineering manager, so I look after a number of the different development teams that we have there, and I also lead our development relations program as well. For those who haven't heard of MessageMedia, which I'm assuming is a big portion of you, we're an API-first business messaging company. So we provide a platform and an API for our customers, who are primarily developers, to use to message their customers with. So a lot of use cases are things like two-factor authentication, appointment reminders, rostering messages, marketing messages, anything where an application needs to talk to a customer or a consumer. Our platform can be used for that. Now, very recently we sort of rebuilt our platform and made it all API first and developer friendly. And technically it all ticked all those boxes. However, the platform wasn't really usable by developers in terms of people knowing about it, people having documentation, SDKs, and actually being able to consume those APIs. So after we built that platform, I was kind of like, let's get some people using it. And I realized that we needed something like a dev relations program to actually make that happen. And that's how I got into DevRel. So this framework that I'm going to talk about and talk you through is a way to help you save time and effort. So it really tries to align those activities that you undertake with your overall goal of what you're trying to achieve. It helps you maintain focus. So by being able to measure all those activities that you're undertaking, you can make sure that the effort that you're putting into those specific activities is actually meeting what you're trying to achieve as well. And finally, it helps you get support and buy-in. Now, this was really important in my case, where we needed the business to be sponsoring and standing behind what we were trying to achieve. So being able to present sort of what we were trying to do in a structured, methodical way really helped us get executive support and sponsorship from people within the business to actually let us go ahead and do this. Now, the framework doesn't measure the overall goal of DevRel or what you were trying to achieve. Instead, it tries to measure the specific activities that you're doing. And then if all of those activities are aligned to that overall goal that you have, then you're kind of hoping that by measuring those activities, you're moving yourself in the right direction towards that goal that you have. So it looks something like this. You start off with your vision, followed by, which sort of breaks down into strategic statements. Under that you have objectives, and then below that you have your activities, which are your day-to-day things that you undertake and do. So the first part of that is the vision, and the vision is essentially, where are you trying to go? What's the reason for actually undertaking a developer relations program within your business? An analogy I like to use for this one is that if you look at that structure that I had up before, the vision is your destination. It's where you're trying to go with this. Following on from that is the strategy that's going to get you to achieving that vision. I like to think of these as a group of strategic statements that you put together, which I'll explain a bit more later on, about how you're going to achieve that vision. If the vision is where you want to go, the strategy is essentially how you're going to close that gap of getting to where you want to be. So I like to think of the strategy as the roads. So you've got your destination, which is the vision, and then you've got your roads, which formulate that strategy. Under the strategy comes your objectives. And the objectives, I like to look at them as high-level groupings or headings for the activities that you're going to undertake. I like to, when I was defining the objectives for MessageMedia, I looked at the strategic statements that we had and looked for sort of the nouns in those and decided from those what our objectives would be. Typically those objectives were just a single word, which again I'll explain a bit more in later on, but it's kind of how we're going to get to that strategic statement and achieve that specific thing that we're trying to do, which leads us on to meeting our vision. Again, back to my analogy. So we've got our destination, which is the vision. We have our roads, which is going to take us there, our strategic statements. And I like to look at the objectives as sort of waypoints along the way, things to make sure that you're on the right track and getting to where you want it to go, which again, your destination is your vision. Underneath your objectives are all the initiatives that you undertake, or I like to call them activities as well. So these are all the day-to-day things that you do as part of your DevRel program that help you, execute and get to where you want to be. So there's been a lot of good examples in talks today about the different activities that you can undertake, lots of different ideas, and they all sort of depend on what you're trying to do. But these activities sort of fit under each objective that you have. And those objectives, which are aligned with your strategy, as aligned with your vision, allow you to actually get to where you want to go. So my last part of the analogy that I've been talking through here, if our vision is the destination and our strategy are the roads that take us there, and the objectives are the waypoints along the way, the activities are our turn-by-turn sort of steps of how to get there. So a nice little mapping analogy to help you sort of remember the structure of that framework. How does it help with DevRel? Because what I've presented so far is kind of just a very generic high-level framework that you can use for sort of anything. So you're kind of right, it is, and it's not specific to dev relations, but I found it really useful and really helpful in terms of how we structured our program and got buy-in from the business, decided what we were going to do, and made sure that all those things we were doing are aligned to what we were trying to achieve. The first part of it I found very useful is that it made it very measurable. So by breaking it down in that fashion, we could have measurements around each of those activities and made sure that what we were doing, we could actually measure and sort of see how it was affecting what we were overall trying to achieve. Secondly, it's structured. So that again really helped with buy-in from the business and people who were paying for our program. It's a new thing in Australia and it's quite an abstract concept, trying to sell and influence developers. So having this structured approach really allowed us to help the execs and the management understand what we were trying to do and how we're going to achieve it. It also gives us strong alignment. So all those activities that we undertake, or that we can undertake, and there's a lot of them. Again, there's a lot of different ways you can actually achieve what you're trying to do. But that structure and that sort of grouping allows us to align all those things that we're doing to that overall vision up the very top of that stack. So how did I use this, and how did we use this framework to build a program to help us get to where we want to be? So the first thing you really need to do is work out your vision and understand what you're actually trying to achieve with this. Why are you doing a DevRel program? What's the point of it? This morning there was an analogy by Alex, I think it was, about calling DevRel a bridge, and I really like that one. Developers in the external community on the outside and your product or your developers internal to your company on the other side. When defining your vision, I kind of like to think of, what is it that the developers are going to cross that bridge for? Why do we want them to cross that bridge? What are we trying to achieve? In putting all that together, it was really helpful to look at other vision statements. They don't have to be centered around DevRel, but other vision statements from other companies around, how do they word it, and getting yourself into that right mindset of trying to think of one statement that really sums up what you're trying to do. So that's sort of the first step there. Get that vision statement in place and really understand why you're going about DevRel in the first place. Following on from that, you want to start to set your strategy. So the strategy is, again, how you're going to get there, how you're going to get to that vision that you have. And this one's not easy either. So again, that vision setting is really quite difficult. It takes a bit of time to actually distill what you're trying to do in one statement that you can all sort of agree on and get behind. Following that, your strategy. So I like to, again, think of these as sort of sentences or statements around what we're going to do to get us to that vision, or strategic statements. And to help me get those statements in place, and again, to help me understand or put that analogy in place of the strategy is what closes that gap of getting you to where you want to be, I asked myself and the business a whole lot of questions. So I'll put them up here, but asking questions like, do developers know what it is that you're trying to offer them? Do they know how to use it? Do they understand how it can benefit and make their lives easier? Because again, that's what we're trying to do. We're trying to help make people's lives easier, make their lives better by offering them something, a service, a product, whatever it might be. Is what you're offering them what they really want? Do you sort of understand what they need and what's going to help them? Does it do what it says on the box? So if you're going out there and talking about what you're offering them, and then they go and use it, does it actually behave in the way they expect and the way that you're sort of explaining it to them? Will it delight them and get them excited enough to use it? So there's typically lots of different people playing in the space of building what you're trying to offer. What makes your offering exciting, and will it delight them? Will it get them excited? And will they actually want to take their time, their precious time, to actually learn what you have to offer and learn how to use it? Can they trust it? So you've offered them something new and it might be something they're going to install into their application. Can they trust that what you're offering them and what they're putting into their system is going to do what it says and they can rely on it? Similarly, do they trust you and do they trust your organisation? So again, do they know about you? Can they trust you? Have you got a proven track record in offering things of a similar type? Again, these are all sort of things that sort of help you understand where you are now. And when you look at that and look at your vision, you put your strategic statements together to help you close those gaps. So I'd imagine that if you ask yourself these questions, there'll be some things that you're like, yep, that sort of relates to me and we can do better in that space, and that will help us get to our vision. Those statements, or those strategic statements, are the things that you understand, you understand the gaps that you need to close. So for example, going back to MessageMedia, one of the things that we realised when we asked ourselves these questions are that what we have isn't easy to use. It's quite difficult, and developers are, the ones that we know of, are sort of complaining about, I can't do this or I don't know how to do that. So one of our strategic statements is to provide an awesome developer experience, which would lead us on to that vision of being a messaging platform that developers want to use and they know about and they think about when they're integrating messaging into their applications. So our strategic statement, or one of ours, was providing an awesome developer experience. Following on from that, we needed to call out our objectives. So what are the things that we need to do to provide an awesome developer experience? And again, like I was saying earlier, I like to think of these objectives as nouns, and I kind of typically call them focus areas as well. So there's one specific thing that we're going to focus on that's going to help us achieve those strategic statements, which will help us achieve our vision. With your objectives, less is more. So don't try and do too much all at once. Really pick out the ones that are most important to you and the ones that are going to give you the most value in achieving that vision. Going back to my example, so I pulled out experience. Typically ours was actually developer experience. But experience as the noun, giving people a really good experience, a really easy to use platform that they can actually trust and know what they're doing with. I've kept that slide there's a lot of white space on there just to point out that you do want to do sort of less rather than trying to do too much in this space. Again, focus on what's really important and what's really going to help you get to that vision. After that, you have your initiatives. So this is all the things that you're going to do to help you achieve that objective, which in turn helps you achieve that strategic statement or multiple strategic statements, which helps you achieve your vision. And this is kind of the fun bit, I really enjoyed this part of it, was that you take that objective that you have, so that one word or that one really short noun about what you want to try and do, and just brainstorm all the different ideas that you have that are going to help you achieve that. And just put everything down on paper or on a whiteboard or wherever you're collecting this information. Include other people from the business as well, or not typically developer relations type people. We get people from sales or marketing, anyone in the business that can come and help you sort of brainstorm creative ways to provide these activities that you want to do. And again, these types of conferences are really good for that as well. You often come away with a lot of good ideas about how to achieve something in dev relations. Brainstorm that list, dump it all out, and then start to refine it and look at it. Look at all the things that you've come up with. And as I was talking about before, try and work out how you're going to measure each one of those things, because typically the measurable ones are going to be a little bit easier to do than the non-measurable ones. You do have to get creative with your measurements as well. They're not always going to be easy. In the previous talk, there was sort of the quantitative and qualitative measurements. The qualitative ones are much harder to measure, but there are ways you can sort of put things in place to at least track how it's progressing. A good example for that one is developer documentation. So it's kind of hard to measure what is good and what is bad developer documentation. Perhaps you're just going based on a user rating. So as they're using it, users are providing a rating, a score. You can use that to measure sort of more qualitative type things as well. You will have a lot of activities, brainstorms, or I hope you do at least. Filter out the ones that you think are more measurable than other ones, and then sort of filter out the ones that you think are more relevant. So which ones are really powerful and which one's going to give you the most value. I also like to use the SMART criteria, or specific, measurable, attainable, relevant, and timely. So it's a criteria you can use to assess all those activities and make sure that they're really going to be, smart, measurable, and they'll actually help you achieve that objective. Again, objective leads into your strategic statements, and your strategic statements lead into that vision of getting to where you want to go. So back to my example, we realised that a big part of having a good developer experience is having really good, easy-to-use SDKs. It's pretty part and parcel, or very simple in DevRel. We all sort of understand how much value they can provide. But trying to explain that to the business and to the execs who were asking for time for this is kind of difficult. So again, being able to align SDKs all the way up to our vision, this framework helps really well with that. But then also, how do you measure your SDKs? That's kind of like a bit difficult as well, because again, they're sort of qualitative. Qualitative's the right word. But sit down, brainstorm, come up with some different metrics that you can use to measure that. And then that eventually becomes 1 or 7 of your activities, depending on how you cut it up. But one of our activities was to produce SDKs in a range of different languages that our developers know and love. And then measuring that by measuring, how quickly can developers use our SDKs to achieve what they want. So there's a concept of time to first hello world when building SDKs, so that how long it takes for a developer to use your SDK to achieve that first thing they're trying to do. We like to call ours time to first message, because with our API we want developers to be able to sign up, get an API key, install an SDK, and send a message. So we measure that. We measure that time and make sure that we are focusing on reducing the time to first message for the SDKs which are showing the worst times, but also for the most popular ones as well. So again, going back to that measurable, maintaining focus stuff that I talked about earlier, we want to make sure that the time and effort we're spending is most valuable to our end users. So up here we'd potentially look to focus on the .NET SDK, because that has the most downloads, but also has the worst time to first message. So having those measurements, again, allows us to make sure that we're spending time on things that are valuable, we're measuring what we're doing, and that framework, that stack, allows us to make sure and be able to explain that building out SDKs and spending money and investing time in them actually aligns all the way back up to that vision that we set at the start of all of this. There are a lot of different other activities as well, and I'm sure you're all undertaking those, or have learnt some today, or thinking about undertaking some. And all of those activities make up this program that you're building. And you kind of sit there and think about all the different things you can do, and depending on your audience, they're all going to be different as well. So when you go through that brainstorming exercise, you might come up with a completely different list of things to perhaps what we're doing. But again, having that framework allows you to structure it and make sure they're all sort of achieving, or they're all designed to help you achieve what you're trying to do. So sort of to recap on that, this is the framework I'd like to present to you, and you start off with your vision. So your vision is that destination, where you want to go. Why are you doing DevRel? Under that is your strategy. So how are we going to get there? What are the gaps that we have at the moment, and how are we going to close those? That's the roads. So you've got to decide which roads you're going to take to help you get to that vision. Underneath that, your objectives. So each of those strategic statements that you have will sort of form an objective. And then those objectives serve as sort of groupings for all the activities that you're going to undertake. The objectives are sort of waypoints along the way, things to help you keep focus and keep on track. I like to call them focus areas as well. And then your initiatives or the activities, so the things that you do day to day to help you achieve that goal. These are your turn-by-turn directions, all the things that every day in your team you guys are executing and making sure that you're getting to where you want to go. Why this is valuable and why I'm here talking about this today is that I find that it gives you a nice, measurable, structured and focused program that you can use to help you get to where you want to go with dev relations. Start with your vision, think about where you want to go, work from there, build up your strategic statements, find those gaps that you need to close, and then execute it. So define your objectives and then pick out all the activities and do them. Measure them, tweak them, change them, but always make sure that you're sort of refining and refocusing your activities or initiatives down the bottom, straight up to that vision that you've got at the top. One last thing I will say on that is there's kind of life cycles in this as well. So the vision is a long-lived thing. That might be several years. We want to achieve this after several years' time. Your strategy is a bit shorter-lived. So they might be sort of months or 6 months or 12 months strategic things that you try and do. Once you've closed that strategy or closed that gap, you might create another one or move on to the next one that's most important for you. Not to say that you can't be doing different strategy parts at the same time either. The objectives might be more short-lived than that, so they might be 3 months or 1 month type things, depending on how small they are. And then under that, your initiatives might be even smaller than that. So depending on what they are, they might be a week or a 4-week type thing that you do, and then tick that box and say, yeah, we've achieved that objective that we were trying to undertake. Hopefully with this, you can sort of take it away and have a think about, if with my DevRel program that I'm working on, how does that fit into this structure here? Or if I'm thinking about creating a DevRel program, how could I use this structure to build that out? You can then use that to convince and influence people within your business that it's an important thing to do and that you've sort of got a good understanding of what you are trying to achieve. And here's the structure, here's the framework, this is what we're going to do. And I hope with that you can then go out and produce a happy, engaged and excited developer community around the thing that you're offering. Thank you.